as we go into October. So let me just go through the has and what we've got going on this week. I'll explain a couple of things and then we'll jump right into our lesson. So today we're doing lessons 11 and 12. You'll notice that we're jumping into the second chapter. I'm also going to do just a brief introduction on the poetry analysis of Battle Hymn of the Republic. And this is something we will be seeing poems pop up throughout the year, and those are going to be what you are working on a major writing assignment, and the grandparent interview is that. And so you are working this week. I'm not going to add other writing, but we will be doing an analysis of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and we'll be doing some of that on Wednesday, and I will introduce it today. Then on Tuesday, your homework is to take the Chapter 1 test. That will be posted probably over the weekend with the rest of the documents by Sunday night or Monday night. So don't panic if that's not there yet. You are to be very neat, put your name on the paper and place it in your homework folder. Those homework folders have become very important to me as they keep all of your papers exactly like I want them to be in one place, and I'm not afraid I'm going to lose them. It's harder to lose big folders than it is to lose lots of little individual papers, so help me in that way. And then I want you to read through the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and I want you to make some observations. So as you read it, I want you, and we'll talk more about this in the intro, but you'll be writing down some thoughts that you may have on that. Then on Wednesday, we will move forward with that analysis, and we will move forward with the next lessons, and you will continue to write your grandmother, granddad, whatever interview, because I will have returned those interviews to you. So I want to begin with lesson 11 in your pink text. So turn to page 55. And we are going to begin by talking about the 4 types of sentences. Now, this should insult your intelligence because you've probably known these since you were in 3rd or 4th grade. I'm going to review them just very, very quickly, and then I'm going to move on to word order in sentences. And none of this should be brand new. Word order, maybe a little bit. So let's start with the 4 types of sentences, and the first one is the declarative sentence. Now, I told my 3rd graders last week that the declarative sentence is the boring one. It is just kind of a normal ho-hum kind of sentence. The cat ran, the dog ate. It's just normal day-to-day sentences. Nothing terribly exciting, ends with a period. Now, the interrogative, you should notice the word interrogate in there. And an interrogative sentence is the question. And if you've ever watched criminal shows, detective shows, all of that, they will often take the criminal into the dark, dingy jail interrogation room, and they will ask them what? Lots of questions. So interrogate, that question, means with the bigger word, interrogative, is the questioning sentence, and that's the one that's going to have the question mark at the end of it. Now, the imperative sentence is probably the one that you hear the most from your mom. This is the one where she is commanding you, and I suspect she commands you a lot to do things around the house. Molly, take out the trash. Josie, go empty the dishwasher. And this is the one that is the command, and it has the understood you in it. We've been talking about this off and on in our diagramming. And if you don't understand that concept, what it means is if I look at you and say, take out the trash, well, who am I talking about? I'm talking about you. Take the trash out. So that you is in parentheses in the diagram, and it is understood. You understand that I'm talking to you. And the imperative is going to have a period, or it could have an exclamation point. If your mom is really loud and very emotional, it could have an exclamation point. The final type of sentence is the exclamatory, and that is the one that always has an exclamation point. That would be the one that, yay, we're going to Disney World, or yay, we get a week off, those kinds of things. So be careful to always put the exclamation. Sometimes I see students that just want to put a period, but you need to put the exclamation point in there. All right, let's talk about word order in sentences. Now, we see this a little bit when we are doing sentence openers with IEW writing. And there's lots of different ways to start sentences. The subject verb is one of those, and that is the natural word order. So if you look at the gray box on 55, that's the natural word order. The complete subject precedes the complete predicate. Subject verb opener. The boy ran across, or the little boy ran quickly across. So little boy is the complete subject and ran quickly is the complete predicate. They come in that order. Now the inverted word order, the complete predicate comes before the complete subject, and we'll look at some examples of those. And then mixed word order, the complete subject comes between two parts of the predicate. And so sometimes these can be related to the sentence openers, and sometimes it's just a matter of the word, the order. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the natural word order because I think you know that one. That's the one we use, and when you're doing sentence openers, that's definitely the one that we use the most. So what I want to do is skip to the inverted word order, and if you look on page 57, right at the very top, it says the least common order is inverted word order. Now I tend to write with a lot of inverted, and it just depends on the writing style. And here's an example. Down, if it's the example just kind of sitting right there in the middle of those two paragraphs. Down the lane toward the barn raced the pup. Now we have to ask the questions that we always ask in order to determine the subject and verb. So we would say, who raced? Well, it would be the pup. What did the pup do? Pup raced. So we still have to come up with the right subject and verb, and this is when it gets a little confusing. Now, I hope you notice that the two groups of words that come before the complete predicate are prepositional phrases. Down the lane, toward the barn, race the pup. So prepositional phrases is almost always a give that your word order is going to be messed up. So if you see lots of prepositional phrases popping up there, that should be a clue. Now, sometimes people will want to just look at the first noun and say, well, that's the subject. Lane is the subject. Well, no, it's not. You still have to find the action, and then you have to find what's doing the action. And in a sentence like this, it can be a little bit confusing. Now, the next piece on page 57 talks about the mixed word order with the complete subject coming between two parts of the complete predicate. And so let's take a look at that. Down the lane to the barn, the pup raced. Mixed order. It has a long introductory adverb phrase. We have a comma there. In his haste, the pup almost fell over his own feet is also mixed orders. It also has the introduction and adverb phrase. And then when Glenn had called, the pup responded immediately is also mixed word order. Now, putting the verb first is inverted. The mixed is when you have all these clauses kind of mixed in. So it's kind of like mixing up cookie dough. So let's think about them one more time. Regular word order, and natural word order is the subject and the verb in that order. Subject comes first, verb. Think of it as your subject verb opener. The inverted means the verb is going to come before the subject. And there's our sample. Down the lane toward the barn raced the pup. So the word raced comes before pup. But then the mixed means we're going to throw phrases in there. And we might have the subject and verb in the middle of two phrases. We might have it at the end. So here was one of the examples. In his haste, the pup almost fell over his own feet. Pup fell. We've got almost thrown in there. We've got in his haste at the beginning. That is your mixed word order. All right. I would like for you to, you will be, let's see. We will actually practice a little bit with this in class. So make sure, I want you to make sure that we take a look at class practice, and then on Wednesday we'll do a little bit more practice. We're not going to go over the 4 types of the sentences, but what we are going to take a look at is, actually that's not one. Oh, here we go. B on written exercises, page 59. So what you're going to do is you're going to pause the video and you're going to look at page 59B, and on your sheet of paper, you're going to answer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and you're going to tell me whether it's inverted, mixed, or natural word order. So pause your video, complete that, and then turn the video back on, and we will continue. So if you're back, I'm hoping that you answered each of the questions. So let's take a look at them. Into its hole scurried the mouse. Now, we notice there's a prepositional phrase right there at the beginning. Do not tell me that hole is the subject, but into its hole, and then what scurried? The mouse. What did the mouse do? It scurried. Well, the verb comes before mouse, so we have to answer inverted. As its tail disappeared, an owl's talons hit the dirt at the edge of the hole. So with that one, we have a clause at the beginning. We have talons hit. So we have subject, verb. So while we have lots of words in that sentence, it's a mixed because the subject and the verb are in that right order. So number 2 is mixed. The hungry owl circled to a nearby tree and waited a long time. So that one, if we find the verb or find the subject, it's owl. What did the owl do? Circled. So it's in order, so it's natural. Cautiously, the mouse's nose tested the air. We have an ly adverb at the beginning, and we have nose tested, but we have an adjective in there, and then we have a direct object at the end. So it's mixed word order. We have other stuff coming into play. Out into the night air inched the mouse. And if we ask the word, or if we ask what the action is, you would tell me inched. And who is inching? It's the mouse. Well, you'll notice that those are inverted. So you have to put inverted for that. So we will practice these a little bit more. But right now I want you to turn to phrases and clauses. And I want you to look on page 60. And I'm going to do a brief introduction of these. And again, we'll revisit these several times over the course of the year. And if you were with me last year, you're going to recognize some of my stories. And so I want to talk about what a phrase is and what a clause is. Now, if you were with me last year, you will remember that a phrase is an incomplete thought. And it has no subject-verb combination. It might have a noun, and it might have an action word, but it does not have the skeleton combination. So you may want to write that down. that your phrase is an incomplete thought. It doesn't have the subject-verb combo. Now, a clause is going to have your subject and verb. And it's going to have somebody doing something. So it's going to have that subject, and then it's going to have the action. And it could be a complete thought, but it may not be as well. And we learned about this last year, and I gave you an example, and I told you that clauses, there's two different kinds. The first kind is independent. And so all of you who were with me last year should now be kind of cluing into what's coming next. An independent clause is like your parents. Your parents are independent. They have their own house. They have money. They have food. They have a car. They have the resources to get you your education. And they really don't need you. They love you. Of course, they need you in their lives, all of that. But in order to survive their independence, they don't need you. Okay? Now, a dependent clause, on the other hand, is like you. You are dependent on your parents. You need money. You need a house. You need food. You need transportation to soccer practice. You need lots of, the list could go on. You need. So a dependent person must have another person that they lean on. The same thing with a dependent clause. It needs to hang on with an independent in order to be able to get its message across. And so we will be looking at clauses and phrases all year long. And when we get to the clauses, we remember that we have to break those down into two categories. And that is the independent and the dependent. So phrases doesn't have the complete skeleton, no subject-verb combo, but a clause will have the subject-verb combo. So let's look at a couple of those, and just so that you can see some examples. If we look at the very bottom of page 60, the angel of the Lord appeared unto Gideon. Prepositional phrases are the best example of phrases. They are going to have the preposition and the object of the preposition, but they don't often have a verb. Now, they might have a word kind of hiding in there that you might think is a verb, but they wouldn't have their own verb. Here's another one. Comparing yourself with others is a phrase. We get lots of examples. A participial phrase, lying on the rocks. Infinitive phrase, everyone wanted to work quickly. And I'm just working down the examples on page 61. But those show you all the different kinds of phrases. Now in class, I will show you how to diagram these. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time doing that. I'd rather do that in class. But there is an excellent, on page 62 and 63, there are excellent examples that I would strongly encourage that you include in your notes, or that you put on an index card. This would be index card worthy, because these kinds of things you are allowed to use on a test. If you have a test and you have completed an index card, you would be allowed to use that. So we have an adjective phrase, an adverb phrase, a noun clause, adjective clause, adverb clause. And I will be spending a little bit of time doing the diagramming on Wednesday. But we'll be also spending a lot of time on each one of these individual things throughout the year. So don't panic if you don't get it right away. But the big thing to remember is that our phrases will not have the complete subject-verb skeleton in them. Our clauses will, both kinds will, dependent and independent, will have a subject and verb. And what I'd like you to do is take a look at, let me see, which one do I want to do? Let's look at the very last one. The sun shone brightly after the shower ended. So if you are looking carefully, you're going to notice two subjects and verbs. The first one's pretty easy, sun shone. And then the second one is shower ended. That's what I'm talking about, is you're going to have multiple skeletons now in your sentences. And you need to be really cautious in how you are handling those. So there's not homework tomorrow based on this, but we are going to do a little practice in class on Wednesday. So you need to make sure that you've watched the video, didn't just go skipping ahead. And now what I'd like to do for about 5 minutes before I let you go is to talk about the poem. Now I posted the poem up on Sycamore, and it's actually not a poem. It began as a poem. So let me begin that. Then it turned into a hymn that I'm sure you've actually heard. But because we are studying American history, because your grammar and writing and history are going to get closer and closer to cooperating this year in preparing you for great books, I will be having segments of Civil War and literature that also pop into our grammar and writing. So I want you to take a look at this, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. If you have not printed it out, I'd like you to hit pause and go find it in our classroom documents and print it out. We're not memorizing this, but we will be talking about it on Wednesday. So you need to have a copy with you in your notebook. So I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to talk briefly and give you some suggestions for analyzing, and we'll be doing more of that on Wednesday. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. And I'm going to read the verses and I'll read the chorus all at one time. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence in the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea, with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us live to make men free, while God is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Now, I'm going to give you a few little pieces of information, and then part of your homework is to actually read through this and make some observations. So I will tell you that the author was Julia Ward Howe, and she was born in 1819 and lived until 1910. So she was an adult during the Civil War, and the Battle Hymn of the Republic was written soon after the Civil War had begun, really pretty quickly after the Civil War had begun. Now, many people don't realize this, but the anti-slavery movement had begun decades prior to the war finally breaking out. Abraham Lincoln happens to be the president chosen by God at this time when this really explodes and becomes an all-out war. He was also anti-slavery, and we will see a lot of things happen. If you haven't already hit some of those things during the course of this year, you will see it. Really, the only way to give an equalizing factor is to say that the anti-slavery movement is very similar to the anti-abortion movement, where you've seen it go on for decades. It's still not yet been resolved. And so as you're thinking in those terms, think about frustrated people. And racism would also be a fairly current, well, decades old, definitely decades old, because this is still coming out of the Civil War, but where there's unrest, where there's still a lot of unrest. And so the war begins, and she writes this poem that actually ends up spurring Lincoln on. And he later says it's one of his favorite battle songs, almost like Uncle Tom's Cabin and Harriet Beecher Stowe ignites him through her writing. So these two significant women who do write, and he sees these things and he's spurred on by them. Now, one of the things that we don't have the privilege of understanding, I don't know the year she wrote it, but we don't understand all that was in her mind. I will tell you that this was a very biblically literate generation, and they didn't have a whole lot to read, so they were reading the Bible, and the Bible was being read to them. So there are lots of references to biblical pieces in the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Now you're going to be like a detective and see if you can come up with some of those biblical references and what she might be talking about. So in the very first line, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord." We want to know what she's talking about. Is she talking about the second coming? Is she talking about the fact that finally there is a war to try to end slavery? Is this God's judgment coming? So you are going to try to be detective and figure out some of what she's writing about. And then on Wednesday, we're going to talk about that. So you have to write 3 observations, 3 pieces where you say, and I don't want you to just say, there were 100 circling camps. Don't tell me that's one of your observations. There's 100 circling camps. Instead, what I want you to answer is something like, what does it mean that he is trampling out the vintage? What does that mean? You're either looking up a word or you're looking in a Bible dictionary or a Bible thesaurus to find where some of this language is coming from. So you're coming with 3 observations for Wednesday, and then we will be talking about it more at length. And again, we're going to be talking about some writing technique, writing styles. And so this was a very common, that the Negro spiritual during the Civil War was very common. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different styles of writing as we move through the 19th and 20th centuries. So take a look at that, and then we will talk about it on Wednesday. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you Wednesday.